I never thought I'd be the kind of person who gets caught staring. I've always been careful, guarded. But there's something about Caspian that makes me forget how to be careful, and last Tuesday in the break room, I got so lost watching his mouth move while he talked that I didn't notice he'd stopped speaking until he licked his lips and smiled at me with this knowing look that made my entire body go hot. Let me back up, because this didn't just happen overnight. I've been working at the marketing firm for about 8 months now, and Caspian started 3 months ago. He's one of those people who just lights up a room when he walks in, not in an obnoxious way, but in this warm, genuine way that makes everyone want to be around him. He's got this dark, wavy hair that's always slightly messy like he just rolled out of bed, and these green eyes that crinkle at the corners when he laughs. And God, does he laugh a lot. The first time I really noticed him, was during a team meeting about 6 weeks after he started. We were all sitting around the conference table, and our creative director was droning on about quarterly projections, and I happened to glance over and catch Caspian doodling in his notebook. He wasn't drawing anything work-related. He was sketching this incredibly detailed dragon, and when he sensed me looking, he glanced up and gave me this conspiratorial smile, like we were both in on the joke of how boring this meeting was. My heart did this weird flip thing in my chest that I tried to ignore. After that, I started noticing him everywhere. In the kitchen making coffee in the morning, always humming something under his breath. At his desk 2 rows over from mine, sometimes stretching his arms above his head in a way that made his shirt ride up slightly. In the elevator, smelling like cedar and something citrusy that I couldn't quite place. I told myself it was just friendly noticing the way you notice any new coworker. But I was lying to myself, and I knew it. The thing is, I've known I was gay since college, but I've never been great at the whole dating thing. I had one serious boyfriend my junior year that ended badly, and since then I've mostly kept to myself. A few dating apps here and there, a handful of dates that went nowhere. I convinced myself I was fine with it, that I didn't need the complication of feelings and relationships, and then Caspian walked into my life and complicated everything without even trying. We started talking more after that meeting. Just small stuff at first. He'd stop by my desk to ask a question about a project, or we'd end up in the break room at the same time and chat about weekend plans or the latest show everyone was watching. He was easy to talk to, which was dangerous because I'm not usually easy at talking. I'm the quiet one, the guy who observes from the corners. But with Caspian, words just seemed to flow. About a month ago, we started having lunch together. It wasn't planned, not at first. We just kept ending up in the same sandwich shop at the same time, and after the 3rd coincidental meeting he laughed and said we should just make it a regular thing. So we did. Every Tuesday and Thursday we'd walk the 3 blocks to this little deli that makes incredible pastrami sandwiches, and we'd sit in the back corner booth and talk. That's when I started noticing his mouth. I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Caspian is an expressive talker. His whole face gets into it, especially his mouth. When he's excited about something, his lips curve up at the corners even before he starts smiling. When he's thinking hard, he bites his lower lip slightly. When he's about to make a joke, there's this little twitch at the corner of his mouth that gives him away every time. I found myself watching for these tells, cataloguing them, getting lost in the way his lips moved around words. And the thing about Caspian's mouth specifically is that it's just aesthetically perfect. I'm not even trying to be poetic here, it's just fact. Full lips, well-defined, with this natural slight upturn that makes him look like he's always on the verge of smiling. I started having these intrusive thoughts during our lunches, wondering what it would be like to kiss him, wondering if his lips were as soft as they looked, wondering if he could tell what I was thinking when I zoned out watching him eat his sandwich. 3 weeks ago, something shifted between us. We were having lunch and talking about his weekend plans, and he mentioned he was thinking about checking out this new art exhibit downtown but didn't want to go alone. Before I could talk myself out of it, I offered to go with him. His whole face lit up and he said he was hoping I'd offer. We made plans for Saturday afternoon, and I spent the rest of the week trying to figure out if this was a date or just 2 co-workers hanging out. Saturday came, and I changed my outfit 4 times before settling on jeans and a dark blue Henley that my sister once told me made my eyes look good. I met Caspian outside the gallery, and he was wearing this soft grey sweater that looked impossibly comfortable and made me want to touch it, to touch him. We spent 2 hours wandering through the exhibit, standing close enough that our arms brushed occasionally, and every time it happened I felt this electric awareness shoot through me. After the gallery we grabbed coffee at this tiny place around the corner and ended up talking for another 3 hours. The conversation flowed from art to childhood memories to dreams for the future, and somewhere in there, Caspian told me about his ex-boyfriend, casually dropping the information like it was no big deal. And maybe it wasn't a big deal to him, but to me it felt monumental. He was gay, or bi, or somewhere on the spectrum. The point is, he dated men, which meant theoretically, in some alternate universe where I was braver, he could date me. I didn't tell him about my own history that day. I wanted to, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just listened and nodded and tried not to let my hope show too obviously on my face. When we finally left the coffee shop, the sun was setting and the air had that perfect early autumn chill to it. We walked toward the subway together, and right before we had to split off in different directions, Caspian pulled me into a hug. It was quick, just a friendly goodbye, but I could feel the warmth of his body through his sweater and smell that cedar citrus scent up close, and it took everything in me not to hold on longer than appropriate. After that day, things felt different between us, more charged somehow. Our lunch conversations got deeper, more personal. He started texting me random thoughts throughout the day, funny observations or memes he thought I'd appreciate. I found myself looking forward to these messages more than I wanted to admit, smiling at my phone like a teenager with a crush. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? A crush. A big, terrifying, all-consuming crush on my coworker who may or may not see me as anything more than a friend. 2 weeks ago, we started staying late at the office together. There was this big project with a tight deadline, and most of the team was pulling long hours. But even after everyone else left, Caspian and I would stay, working side by side, ordering takeout, taking breaks to talk about everything and nothing. One night around 9, we were both exhausted and punchy from too much coffee, and Caspian started doing impressions of our various co-workers. He was surprisingly good at it, and I laughed so hard I actually snorted, which made him laugh, and we just sat there in the empty office giggling like idiots. When we finally calmed down, there was this moment where we just looked at each other, and something in the air between us felt heavy and expectant. Caspian's smile faded slightly and his eyes dropped to my mouth for just a second before flicking back up. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. But then his phone buzzed with a text and the moment broke, and we both went back to our computers like nothing had happened. Except something had happened, or almost happened, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started noticing the way Caspian looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. These long considering looks that made me feel exposed and seen, in a way that was both terrifying and thrilling. I wondered if he was going through the same internal debate I was, weighing the risk of saying something against the risk of saying nothing. Last week, a group from work went out for drinks on Friday night, and Caspian and I ended up sitting next to each other at the bar. As the night went on and people started leaving, we stayed, ordering one more drink and then another. We weren't drunk, just pleasantly buzzed, and the conversation turned to relationships and dating. Someone asked Caspian if he was seeing anyone, and he said no. He'd been single for over a year and was starting to think he was too picky. Then he looked at me and said, "Sometimes the right person is worth waiting for," and the way he held my gaze made me forget how to breathe. I should have said something then, should have been brave and honest and told him I'd been thinking about him constantly for weeks. But I chickened out, just smiled and changed the subject and hated myself a little bit for it. We left the bar together around midnight and shared a cab since we live in the same general direction. When the cab stopped at my building first, Caspian touched my arm as I was getting out and said he really enjoyed spending time with me in this soft, meaningful way that felt like it was supposed to mean something more. I said I enjoyed spending time with him too, and then I got out of the cab and went up to my apartment and lay awake for hours replaying every moment of the evening, which brings me to Tuesday, this Tuesday, the day everything changed. We'd had our usual lunch together, and the conversation had been good, easy, comfortable in the way it always was. We walked back to the office and went to our respective desks, and I tried to focus on work but kept getting distracted by thoughts of Caspian 2 rows over. Around 3, I needed coffee desperately, so I headed to the break room. Caspian was already there, making tea at the counter. He looked up when I walked in and smiled, and I felt that now familiar flutter in my chest. I started making my coffee while he waited for his tea to steep, and we fell into conversation about the project we'd been working on. He was excited about some new direction the client had approved, and he was talking with his hands the way he does when he's enthusiastic about something, his whole body animated and alive, and I was watching his mouth. Not obviously, I thought, just glancing at it occasionally while he talked. But I got distracted by the way his lips moved, the way they curved around certain words, and I started thinking about what it would be like to kiss him right there in the break room, with the fluorescent lights humming overhead and the coffee maker gurgling behind me. I imagined stepping closer, reaching up to touch his face, pressing my lips against his, and finally knowing what he tasted like. I was so lost in this fantasy that I didn't realize he'd stopped talking, didn't notice the silence until he said my name, soft and questioning. I blinked and looked up from his mouth to his eyes, and the expression on his face made my stomach drop. He knew. He absolutely knew I'd been staring at his mouth, and I'd been caught, and there was no way to play this off as anything other than what it was. For a second that felt like an eternity, we just looked at each other. My face was burning and my heart was racing, and I was trying to figure out how to apologize or explain or laugh it off. But then Caspian did something I didn't expect. He licked his lips, slow and deliberate, his tongue dragging across his lower lip while maintaining eye contact with me. And then he smiled. Not a friendly co-worker smile, but something different. Something knowing and interested and maybe even a little bit pleased. My brain short-circuited. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there and stare at him while he stepped closer to me. He was only about a foot away now, close enough that I could see the little gold flecks in his green eyes, close enough to smell cedar and citrus and something underneath that was just him. He said my name again, quieter this time, and then he said, "You know, I've been hoping you'd look at me like that." His voice was low and a little rough, and it sent shivers down my spine. I managed to find my voice enough to ask, "Like what?" even though I knew exactly what he meant. He smiled wider and said, "Like you want to kiss me." I should have been smooth about it. Should have said something clever or charming. Instead, I just breathed out, "I do," and watched his pupils dilate. He reached up and touched my face, his palm warm against my cheek, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. He asked if he could kiss me, and I nodded because words were beyond me at that point. When Caspian kissed me, everything else disappeared. The break room, the office, the fact that we were technically at work and anyone could walk in. None of it mattered. His lips were soft and sure against mine, and he tasted like the peppermint tea he'd been making, and it was everything I'd been imagining for weeks except better because it was real. It was actually happening. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair, and I gripped the front of his shirt to steady myself because my knees had gone weak. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Caspian rested his forehead against mine and laughed softly. This breathless, happy sound that made my heart feel too big for my chest. He said he'd been wanting to do that for weeks, that he'd been trying to figure out if I was interested, or if he was just projecting his own feelings onto every interaction we had. I told him I'd been going through the exact same mental gymnastics, and we both laughed at how ridiculous we'd been. We heard footsteps in the hallway and jumped apart just as someone from accounting walked in. We tried to act casual, but I'm pretty sure we both looked thoroughly kissed and obviously guilty. The accounting guy grabbed something from the fridge and left without seeming to notice anything, and as soon as he was gone, Caspian and I looked at each other and started laughing again. We finished making our drinks and headed back to our desks, but not before Caspian squeezed my hand and told me we needed to talk later properly. I agreed, and spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, unable to focus on anything except the feeling of his lips on mine, and the knowledge that he'd been wanting to kiss me too. We left work together that evening and walked to a quiet park a few blocks away. We sat on a bench overlooking a small pond and finally had the conversation we should have had weeks ago. Caspian told me he'd been attracted to me almost from the moment we met, but he wasn't sure if I was gay or interested, and he didn't want to make things weird at work. I told him I'd been struggling with the same fears, too scared to risk our friendship or make our working relationship awkward. We talked about what we wanted this to be, and we both agreed we wanted to try. Actually try. Not just hook up or keep it casual, but date properly and see where this could go. Caspian admitted he doesn't usually fall for people quickly, but there was something about me that felt different, felt right. I told him I felt the same way, that he'd gotten under my skin in the best possible way, and I couldn't imagine not exploring this thing between us. As the sun set and the park lights flickered on, Caspian kissed me again, slower this time, sweeter. When we pulled apart, he was smiling that smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners, and I knew I was completely gone for this man. We made plans for a proper date that weekend, and he walked me home, holding my hand the entire way. That was 3 days ago, and I'm still processing the fact that this is real, that Caspian wants me the way I want him. We've been texting constantly, these long rambling messages about everything and nothing, peppered with flirty comments that make me grin at my phone like an idiot. At work, we're trying to be professional, but it's hard when all I want to do is kiss him again. We keep exchanging these loaded glances across the office, and yesterday he sent me a text that just said, "Stop looking at my mouth, or I won't be responsible for my actions," which made me laugh out loud at my desk. Our date is tomorrow night. He won't tell me where we're going, just said to dress casual and be ready for an adventure. I'm nervous and excited and terrified in the best way. This feels different from anything I've experienced before. It feels important, like this could be the start of something real, something lasting. I keep thinking about that moment in the break room, the way he licked his lips and smiled at me when he caught me staring. How one small moment of courage, of being seen and seeing in return, changed everything. I spent so long being careful, being guarded, protecting myself from potential hurt. But Caspian makes me want to be brave, makes me want to risk my heart because the possibility of what we could have together feels worth any risk. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe this will be the great love story I've been waiting for. Maybe it'll be something shorter, but still meaningful. Maybe we'll crash and burn spectacularly. But for the first time in a long time, I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to be vulnerable and open and honest about what I want. And what I want is him. His laugh, his smile, his terrible impressions of our co-workers, his expressive mouth that I can now kiss whenever I want. All of it. So yeah, he caught me staring at his mouth. And thank God he did, because I might have spent months or even years dancing around these feelings, too scared to make a move. But he saw me, really saw me. And instead of letting the moment pass, he claimed it. He licked his lips and smiled and kissed me in a break room under fluorescent lights, and it was perfect. It was the beginning of something I didn't even know I was looking for until I found it. Tomorrow night, I'm going on a date with Caspian, and I can't wait. Total_char_count 24,847